The Vietnam War lasted from 1955 to 1975. During this period, many protests ensued due to the lack of civilian support for the war.
There were protests, and I was coming out of high school going to Nebraska Wesleyan College as the fighting really got started over there. And in America soon, knowing of deaths and deaths to civilians and young babies in Vietnam, you saw the pictures, and then protests started in the United States. Why, and a lot of the question was, why was the war started? And the government started with John F. Kennedy sending special forces in there to stop communism. They called it a domino effect. If the communists could take over South Vietnam, they think it'd be a domino effect. Other countries would fall too. And then gradually we got more and more. And then I think during President Johnson, they come up with an excuse to really go to war. They said one of their ships had been attacked. That was always questioned. So the protest I remember, and I had a friend, a guy I knew, and I lived in Ashland, close to Lincoln, and there was a protest in Lincoln, and he got beat up, and he lost the sight of one eye. And so that, besides all the news and the protest around the United States, that was the closest one that I knew about and stuff. And then basically as years went on, the whole country seemed to turn against it, and that when soldiers came home, they were disrespected, you could call it that way, to the point where they quit wearing their uniform coming home and stuff like that. They instituted the draft, and it didn't really affect me. I got out of high school and worked for a year so I could afford to go to college, and that was my plan. And then I found out that if you're in college, it's called a college deferment. So the college enrollments across the United States went up pretty good at that time. And so I didn't think much about it, just read about the war and the good and the bad and stuff like that. But so for 4 years at Wesleyan, I was deferred from the draft. I wasn't in the draft. And then by middle 60s, the war probably was at its highest, and I got out of Wesleyan in 64, I was married, and then at that time, and again, I didn't think much about it, but I realized I had a marriage deferment. And so when that came in, if you were married, you weren't in the draft. And consequently, Las Vegas saw a huge increase in marriages. A lot of young men and girls got married in Las Vegas, quickie marriages, I guess. And there's some guys that went to Canada. And about that time, instead of just a draft, they had a lottery system. They drew numbers. And so I was married and had a job in Lincoln, and it wasn't that my number come up, but because of my age, and I think they dropped the marriage deferment, I was called to go to Omaha to take an Army physical. And I did that. And it was eye-opener. And I won't go into it, but it was really crazy. And then my number never came up in that lottery.